turn it over to Derwin. So good morning, everyone, to the July 25th, 2021 meeting of the Affordable Housing Coalition. I'm Marla Newman, Community Development Director, and am providing, in addition to Sharon Richmond of our staff, our Deputy Director, and Melon Parker, our Project Planning Supervisor, we're providing staff support to the coalition. And so with that, I will turn it over to Derwin Montgomery as one of our co-chairs to get us started on today's agenda.
Thanks, Paula, and thank you and the rest of the team for all the hard work you all been doing and everything that's helped lead us to this moment where we are now, to some information we'll be digesting. So we can walk through the agenda as outlined. The first step on the agenda we have is a discussion around creation of a 10-year plan to create and preserve affordable housing. And this is, I guess you'll walk us through the housing NOLA historical documents.
Okay, so part of what was in your packet for today, again, we're, as Derwin mentioned, some of the historical documents that kind of outlined what the processes were, some of the thinking behind how the housing NOLA process got started. And so one of the things that I'll say kind of stood out for me, if we just started actually with that document that just has Housing New Orleans at the top, and it says building community prosperity in the Crescent City. I kind of walked through that and actually found where a number of the steps and recommendations and strategies they were looking at actually aligned with some of the work we've already started to do. And so as an example, if you look at the one that says Chapter 1, Fostering Diverse Livable Neighborhoods, the report that we walked through a little bit last month from For Everyone Home on their anti-displacement policy recommendations, the second policy proposal or area of concern or interest was building inclusive community. And so, I just continued to kind of walk through this document and looked at that document. And as I even continued under the Chapter 1, Fostering Diverse Livable Neighborhoods from the New Orleans document, when I got to the fourth item under there, and they were talking about existing housing activities and initiatives, I made a note of the work that we did with the Center for Community Progress around vacant, abandoned, and deteriorated properties. And we have that report that you also have a copy of. Then, of course, the latest from Grounded Solutions Network with the For Everyone Home initiative. And then council, we took an information item to council in June, advising that staff was about to issue an RFP for a consultant to do an assessment of our Continuum of Care. So that service network of agencies that support people experiencing homelessness. And so, you know, to see about their 10-year plan to end homelessness there, and our about to embark on some work about really getting our arms around the performance, governance, effectiveness, and the like of our COC. This really was aligning with work, again, that we're already doing. So, and then as I went to the next chapter, which was Chapter 2 on preserving affordability and the quality of the existing housing stock, in the For Everyone Home document, that touched on their policy items number 2, 3, and 4. So again, we have some alignment already with work that we're doing. I moved to then Chapter 3, where it is called Building New Affordable Housing for New Orleans, and that is in alignment with the For Everyone Home report number 1. Chapter 4 of their document, which was promoting homeless, senior, supportive, and accessible housing. I just made a note that, with our COC assessment, we will begin to address some of that. And I'll pause a minute to also add that part of our thinking, even with the COC assessment, is that whatever comes out of that assessment and any recommendations would have to be part of that overarching maybe 10-year plan that we create, so that while there may be some fundamental items that have for implementation and so forth on the COC side, whatever it is that relates to the provision of housing has to be a part of this overarching 10-year plan. I mean, we have the conversation around homelessness because of a lack of housing. So we figured that whatever happens on the homeless side has to be part and parcel of this overarching plan, so that they're not operating in two silos. And then on the last chapter 5, where it talks about refining city financing tools and so forth, I noted that some aspects of our recommendation, number 1 and number 2, from the For Everyone Home document, again, somewhat aligned. And I made a specific note of the Housing Trust Fund and particularly the land bank, because of course, those were 2 items that were noted in the For Everyone Home report. And actually the land bank recommendation is the action plan that was created, that the council adopted for staff to start to work through the process of gathering all the information necessary to establish a land bank. So, of course, when we get to chapter 6, implementing a plan and all of that, obviously those are things that, we would need to be working through and a whole host of other activities. But then I also appreciated that chapter 7, the appendix, one of the things there had listed was a glossary. And of course, we worked on our glossary a few months ago. So I say all of that as I walk through at least this overview document, that we've done quite a lot of legwork that can help probably move us along in a pretty decent fashion. I will pause there before looking at their organizational chart and how they describe that. So I'll pause for any questions or discussion.
Those are questions on those items. Joe?
No, I was just going to ask Derwin, Marla, if you knew how long it took NOLA to put their plan together. I know, you just read from the document, but do you know how long it took them when they first started to actually come to this plan? And we may have talked about that when I forget her name, that did the presentation to us.
Right. It took them, they were trying to get it done in 12 months, and it actually took about 14, almost 15 months.
Really? Okay.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And did they work with, like you talked about the 10-year plan to end homelessness, which I think has ended, and they've gone to another kind of process to deal with homelessness now, I believe. But did they include other outside stakeholders in putting their plan together than just the coalition that formed the NOLA organization?
Yes. And actually, in the next document where it talks about the organizational structure and so forth, there is a list of their advisory board members, and it has public officials, business, restaurants.
Okay.
Hotel, lodging, policymakers, data, foundations, financial institutions.
Right. Yeah. All those stakeholders.
Yeah, there is a ton of them.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a ton of them. Yeah, and that is part of the reason for the length of time it took to develop the plan, is because there were a number of community engagement events. There was a housing summit that they had at some point early on, and then they had a number of actual community-based engagement events. Right. So that is a big part of the time. Okay. Was the engagement process.
Right.
Other questions before we kind of just take a look? And this was, I know, a good little bit of info to digest, and it's really kind of just giving us a flavor of their process. And then we'll talk about another process as we walk through this that they helped or they were looking to support. So on the organizational plan, there's a diagram that kind of shows how they structured their work. And, you know, one of the things that's interesting for our community, and I talked with Andrenica Morris about this yesterday, and that is New Orleans had some community capacity to really kind of lead this initiative, right? It was not led by the city. It was led by community. And so, you know, I did explain to her that that is one of the things that we will have to figure out how we move forward with creating any kind of plan, and that is who will kind of carry it. Not that we all would not have, and all when I say, I mean stakeholders, when I say all, not that stakeholders and everyone wouldn't have pieces that they own and would be responsible for, but somebody kind of has to, what they say, hold the work, right? And so that I know will be one of the big things that we'll need to kind of think through in depth. But
yeah, Carl, you know, that was one of the things I was curious about as well, was who carried the water for them. excuse me, but who carried the water for them and keeping it, because you kind of need, you know, for lack of a better, a quarterback or somebody that does carry, you know, the work, if you would, kind of thing, and keeping it coherent and cohesive. At the same time, making sure that all the voices are being heard that need to be heard to give the input that needs to be there to formulate a plan like this. But it does follow someone. And it's interesting that you said that the community did it as opposed to the city, which to me is the way to do it if you can get someone from the community to step up and do that. And maybe I've missed it in our community, but I haven't seen in our community from either a foundation perspective, other than what Paula has been doing, but I haven't seen anyone step up to take on, you know, affordable housing as an issue that this community needs to deal with, much like we've done economic development or arts or education or anything like that.
Right. And that has been my sense and my read as well. And that's why, as you'll see on the agenda, that second bullet about technical support, under there, you know, part of the question is capacity building. You know, where do we get that capacity to do it? But yeah, that's going to be probably the big question that we have to answer or issue we have to solve. I do know we can do it. You know, it's just a matter of how we get there. And so in the conversations with Andrenica Morris, you know, we did talk about that. And that's part of the reason why the document I emailed this morning, you know, is an outline of a way that they were proposing to help the city of Nashville. And I think they had some similar capacity issues. And as Ms. Morris explained to me, you know, that particular document, it has a list of different services that they were offering to provide Nashville. And similarly with us, if that's something that we wanted to look at, you know, we could have a more in-depth conversation with that organization, because that is one of the key things that they're trying to do now, is help other communities create their own plan. And then we could just decide, well, which parts do we need? You know, because like I said, when I looked through this, I thought, well, geez, you know, we've already done some of the stuff, especially from some of the research and data, and even with a few of the policy recommendations, quite honestly. So, you know, I think part of it then is, you know, how do we organize ourselves? Who owns that role, like you said, Joe, to be the quarterback? You know, who makes sure the work moves? who makes sure that folks are accountable to the pieces that they own. And so, we talked about how we could potentially look at that, but I think what might be helpful is for us to probably have a really a significant block of time, 3-4 hours potentially, to just sit down and just really talk about who Winston is, where we're trying to go, what we want to achieve. We've got, these various reports. We might need to have some kind of data update to our housing study and needs assessment that was done in 2018, because we know a lot has changed since then. But with what we have, what more do we need? And then how do we get community in this to help formulate the strategy? And again, who's going to own the pieces of it and kind of keep us on track? So,
Marla, just, and it goes to that point both you and Joe were speaking to, and I guess it's a question as much as a comment, in trying to, because I'm there with you on a block of time for us to kind of assess it. But we want to define, when we say community and community lead and community engagement, I see two different kind of spaces on the community lead. One is in the sense of community who's leading the work from a day-to-day standpoint, and then the piece of the community of how we're engaging the community voice in the shaping of what we're doing and how we're doing it. Is that what we're okay? Yeah, got it. Okay.
Got to have that community voice to shape the plan, because otherwise it's DOA. We've got to have that community voice, and you'll see in terms of their organizational plan and description. They had an actual community engagement working group, and then they had a community advisory group. So they really had a lot of focus on community. Both the stakeholder side in terms of those who work in community and serve community, but also the resident voice.
Yeah. And I know we'll come back and we set a time for us to even have that real specific conversation on that community lead thought. But one thing I will put out, for us in Winston, for so long, the city has held those keys to most of the housing stuff, or what happens or what didn't happen. And even when it comes to housing authority and the housing authority's work, folks kind of don't understand how that works. And, most people think the housing authority is a part of the city and don't understand, how those functions of housing engagement happen. So, and whatever we do and how we end up framing and talking through things, as we've shared in the past, I think it will be important, whomever and however that ending structure is, that we go back to some of those key points we discussed early on, which was around helping to communicate to community, so folks understand where do we need to be going to have these dialogues, who is helping to shape those conversations, as there's so much that I think lacks from folks understanding on where to go and how that stuff moves forward for us as a whole. But just, again, like I said, just thinking out loud about there.
Yeah, that's true. And I think that's where we'll probably spend a lot of our time. I mean, I know we've got some of the fundamental kind of structural stuff, but, identifying stakeholders, understanding the processes for engaging residents and, through it, be it the neighborhood association level. I know we'd have to kind of figure out a lot of that. And thankfully, we've got Paula as part of our team, who is very skilled in that. So I know Paula can lend a lot of her talent and expertise to this. And I actually shared that with Ms. Morris yesterday, that we were fortunate to have Paula as a part of the coalition. And so that gives us another head start, right? And then I know a lot of you have relationships in the community at both the resident and neighborhood association level, but then just as it relates to other stakeholders in community who might not be what we would ordinarily consider usual suspects in the affordable housing space, but might really need to be at the table because they may not have seen that there is a relationship between maybe the work that they do and housing. But I think that there's more to this that we'll have to flesh out. And let's see, I want to see if there was anything else in particular about their structure. And, and of course, I know it's not our intent to do a housing NOLA kind of situation here in Winston. Obviously, we'll need to do what fits this community, but at least in terms of a overarching framework and something to kind of get us thinking about what it could potentially look like. I thought that these were some good documents for us to peruse. And I'm looking through to see, and you'll see also, I'm just kind of skipping through some of the documents, and I'm now at that bullet that is Housing NOLA Together, the initiative proposal, which they actually submitted to a local foundation for some of the seed funding to get the work going. That was submitted to the Foundation for Louisiana, and it was created in response to Hurricane Katrina. I thought it was a very, very good proposal, how they were basically kind of making their case for the work and then for the resources to support the work. And in here, they even talk about, convening focus groups and about community members and so forth, and actually touching on a lot of the same kinds of conversations that we've been having over the last few months. So it was really just in here as a resource. They were showing as an initial overarching budget to get their plan work started of $87,500. Now, of course, that was, 8 years ago? My math is bad. Let's see, they started 2014.
Yeah, about 8 years ago.
Yeah, so, and then they made the request to the foundation of $35,000, and then we're looking at some other sources and probably some in-kind stuff to comprise the whole budget. And I know there's a couple of footnotes there that they were going to raise some funds through strategic partnerships. The group that wrote this is the Greater New Orleans Housing Alliance. So that's who actually carried that work initially. And then one of the things that grew out of it was the actual standing up of the organization Housing NOLA, right, to then carry forward with the implementation. And so I mentioned that because you see on here it has GNOHA will raise funds. It is a dues-paying organization, and so that's why you see the membership dues and contributions in the footnote.
But Marley, and in addition to that, if you look at, and I don't know whether this is appropriate or not, but if you look at the Nashville budget that you have in this document you sent this morning, I mean, that's obviously it's a little bit more than the 87 that you would think, because obviously 8 years ago, and then this one is current. But there's, if you go to option one, is like 126,000. I didn't look at the different components, but if you go to the development and implementation, it goes to like 307. When you look at the total thing, plus a year or two of implementation, which is option 2 in their budget on the Nashville thing. So, whatever we do, I hope we don't shortchange ourselves in trying to come out as least expensive. I won't use the word cheap, but as least expensive as possible to try to produce a document or a plan that really is going to guide us for the next 10 or 15 years. And to that point, I was curious about, and I didn't look in there to see, your comments about, getting back to the quarterback or someone from the community or entity from the community carrying the water for this. Do you know, and again, this may be a question that's ahead of its time, but are we thinking about having, a person, and it has to be a person, whether they're with the city or whether they're, a consultant or a contracted person, but someone that's going to be responsible for all questions and development of the plan, once it's done, or even as it's being developed, much like the United Way and the city did with the 10-year plan, and Andrea Kurtz was the person you go, if you want to know something about homelessness, you go to Andrea Kurtz. So are we thinking about that kind of concept for this, or what do you think?
I think we do need a third party. I absolutely do. Because this is big work. And so, you know, I'll put it like this. New Orleans stood up an organization to do it, right? Because it is a lot of work. You have a lot of stakeholders. You have a lot of people who own different parts of it. And so I think that it's bigger than the city, because the city would need to be held accountable for our piece, right? And so I do think it needs to reside and be managed, if you will, for lack of a better term in the moment, outside of City Hall.
Yes, I think you're right. And more than just for that, but because of, I won't say regulatory, but those things that prevent public officials, if the city is doing it, they're beholden to whatever the public, processes are for procurement and all the other stuff that goes along with getting work like this done. And, I think we need a structure that's going to be a little more flexible than that, but obviously with strong city support, much like, again, the United Way, the 10-year plan, which was done through the United Way, but Tim West will tell you there that that grants, CDBG grants and other things that were being done that the city can do with the line item for, 10-year planning in homelessness or United Way, was how that support manifested itself. So I think that you got to have that kind of structure in order to be more effective in trying to move it forward.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely.
Joe, I agree 100% in the sense of the need for that how we have that third party. There's a few things that come in my mind, and that is one, that how do you establish and create that strong partnership and maintain that where you have it with the city and others to make sure that you have those conduits and that support through. I think in housing it may be a little bit easier to establish. But I think even if you ask Paula now, the work that we have going on with P4P and others, as something that's new, that's coming up in a similar kind of manifestation, there's some challenges in terms of just making sure that folks see that work and see it in the lens that it needs to be seen. But then also, as much of the good work that the CLC overall has done for homelessness, there are some challenges in that model that don't allow for real accountability and movement on some things. And I think if we go into this development and planning with acknowledgement of what those gaps are, we can do it better as we go and frame it. And just because we have history of what has worked in those models and what has not worked in those kind of models.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. One of the things, back to the budget for Nashville, because I looked at the first option that they had and then that second part, what I noticed was a big change was the line items regarding the capacity building. They added information on capacity building, as well as it looks like, I think that was where the biggest change came from, such that the 2019 through 2020 was similar to, on that first page, it was just the capacity building pieces that were added in. And then that 2020 to 21 was the actual implementation. So where they were going to support like the first year of implementation, I think is how it started to look differently. Yeah, the neighborhood capacity building initiative, CDC capacity building. So I think those were a few of the areas where I saw some additional funds coming in from that very original, that option one budget. But, certainly when I spoke with Ms. Morris, we did talk about, what would be the specific needs for Winston, and how do we kind of get to a process of identifying those and then seeing what the support could be that organization could lend us. And I know that they've also been in touch with, I think it's Richmond, Virginia. I need to confirm, but there were a couple of others that they've also been in conversation with about potentially providing some technical support similar to probably what we may need at some point going forward. So having kind of done just a quick overview of the documents, I'll pause again to see if there's some other thoughts or questions before we really talk about what we need to get started. Okay. All right. So I guess the question is, how do we want to get started? So one idea. One suggestion I wanted to float is, would we be interested in maybe inviting Ms. Morris to come and sit with us for 3 or 4 hours and really just kind of have a deeper dive into what we're doing? Maybe have like a work session, say, maybe at our September meeting. And she just come and sit with us, because I mean, she was there from day one. I mean, I was involved in the work too, but in a very different role. But I think that a ton of questions that we probably have, she could help answer, and maybe have some experience that she could also share, in terms of what went well with the process and what didn't. And so some of those things that we need to be mindful of as we embark on a similar process.
Now, is she the one that we had the presentation with several months ago? Mm-hmm. Okay. All right.
Yeah, I was just going to say, Marla, I guess a question and then a comment if we were to do that, a framing of it. One, as we're moving forward in this, I know some of the conversations that we've had have been around kind of the resources to help start this stuff, and even some of the dollars that we needed to do it. And so with acknowledgement that, things are happening, things are moving, what are your thoughts on that resourcing side of this? When we think about potential use on the ARPA side or CDBG funds that are coming that'll have increase that could be used for this kind of purpose. What are your thoughts on where we are and where we need to be from a timing standpoint of saying to the city or to other partners, hey, we need X dollars to help move this concept forward?
So a couple of things on that. One, I think what the overarching money is that we'll need, I think having the conversation with her to kind of help us get clear on what it is we need, therefore we can figure out what the relevant costs would be. I think we need that to understand that first. I do think that it needs to be a collaborative venture in terms of investment in making the plan. So we would have to talk some strategy about, how we raise the funds or assemble the funds. In the work that we did with For Everyone Home, in that for that work, there was a budget that was approved. And in as much as a lot of what came out of For Everyone Home actually tracks some of the work here for the housing plan, I think it would be reasonable for us to be able to tap a portion of the For Everyone Home budget, because that's part of why it was created the way it was for implementation. some of the policy recommendations and so forth. And so I think that we have some resources, and those were bond dollars. So I think we have some resources that we could possibly tap from the city pot existing. But I think overall, when it comes to what's it going to take, how much is it going to cost, and what's it going to take to actually fund the work, I think it probably is one of those things where we will need to assemble a cohort of investors to help underwrite the work, similar to what they did in New Orleans. Did I answer your question? Miss anything?
Yeah. So yeah, I guess the long-term piece I'm with you on. And I was just trying to make sure that just in terms of whatever windows for that folks were moving with and any cycles on stuff that if we were needing to be in it, that whatever timeline that we had, I know you're in those conversations, just for the good of the group, that we knew, that we wouldn't be missing anything by, the different planning components that we're doing.
Right. Yeah, and as far as ARPA, the city is moving towards coming up with a set of priorities for the utilization of that money. A document was shared with council about a week and a half ago, maybe, kind of like a framework or framing rather document. And the council will have a work session in August to talk about what some of their interests and priorities might be, especially as they align with the city's strategic plan that the council created. So we do expect that there will be some alignment with that. I suspect that, well, let me say something else. So it was just last week that the public comment period ended for the final rule from Treasury on the utilization of the ARPA funds. Because over time, as we've been getting the FAQs and the other updates, some of the uses have changed or have been more refined. And so I think one of the reasons council is really kind of taking a measured approach is because they don't want to make a decision too soon, and then the final rule comes out and says, no, we have to shift gears. So, so the public comment period closed last week, and of course, once the comments are all taken into consideration and the rule is written, then of course it goes out for public comment again. But I think once that final rule is written, we probably will have a pretty decent idea of what's allowed and what isn't. And so my expectation is sometime in the fall, council will make it known what its priorities are, and whether they'll have a set of priorities for this first tranche that has been received, and then a second set for the tranche that will come next May. All of those kinds of specifics, I think, will become a lot clearer in the fall. But they will be having a work session in August to really start the conversation in earnest. So the county has gotten out ahead of us because I know they're already accepting applications, but our council is kind of taking a more measured approach.
Got it. And so with that, I guess the framing kind of comment that I had about the actual time if we were to have her come in and to be present was more directed on, kind of what would be the result of that time together. So we look at an actual document in terms of saying, hey, this is our framework for our plan that we want to have, or more of a sense of education or understanding to get questions out at that time. What would, just trying to figure out in terms of like the outcomes.
So I think the outcomes are, really kind of help us clarify, what it is that we want to achieve. and some of the things that might be necessary to help us achieve those things. And I think that, certainly some guidance and advice on how to proceed if that's whatever choice we want to go, how we want to do it. And then she did share that she could then, after having spoken with us, and she's also asked that if she's able to come, if she could also spend some time talking with some folks in community while she's here. And so I think what she would do then on the back end is actually outline, these are the steps that we would need based on the conversations with us. And these are the steps, and actually provide us with a proposal to do some of the work if we were so inclined to engage them to help us. So probably end up with a document maybe similar to the one from Nashville, but I think the one that came out of Nashville was a result of some in-depth conversation and kind of scan of the community. And then that proposal went to them to see if that was something that they wanted to do. And so they have been in touch. That particular proposal was before they had a change in leadership with the city a couple of years ago. And so it's just been recently that the new administration, if you will, has reached out to re-engage them to try to pick this work back up. So I think ultimately from her side, advice, guidance, a little counsel, and then a proposal based on what she hears from us.
Okay, gotcha. Okay, so I guess that comes back to your question before. I guess how do we want to proceed with that? What is our thoughts on how to move forward? So I guess to the rest members in terms of, does this sound like a good direction looking towards September to have her come in and to help us get that so that we can then take that next step, clarify any questions we had on framing. Folks have questions on that?
I don't have any questions, and it sounds like a good use of time. But it would also, I'm assuming, Marla, that we'd have to have something done or prepared for her to look at or to guide her. Or, is there anything, and this may be the question you asked, Derwin, I don't know, but is there something that's going to guide her when she's here, or will she just come in with a blank slate and say, this is what y'all need to put together kind of thing? I want to make sure that we use her time wisely, but also our time as well.
So I can provide her with our report from For Everyone Home, the CCP report. She can, I can also provide her with the housing study and needs assessment to kind of give her some background. I don't think she'll have that concept of, this is exactly what it will look like. I really think right. Yeah.
Maybe it'll help. Maybe, and I don't know, you know her better than we do, but maybe it'll help if you ask her what would be helpful for you when you come, for us to have together for you to receive in advance of your coming to make better use of her time. I mean, maybe that's the way to go about it. I don't know.
Yes. Oh yeah, and I can definitely ask her that. That's not an issue at all. What does she need? Because to that point, where she said, she would like to really use some of her time here to actually meet some folks in the community, who could potentially be stakeholders at the table, to just kind of get a sense of, well, what is the climate, maybe how high is the mountain we have to climb to actually find the capacity to stand this up. So she really wants to spend a little time on the ground, just getting her arms around things so that she can say, okay, it looks like you might need X, Y, and Z support from us to get you over the finish line.
Right.
Yeah, so no, I will definitely, ask her what she needs from me and from the committee, to help her make the most of her time here.
And do you know when Nashville will make a decision? Now, this is a proposal to Nashville, right, to help them. Where are they in their process?
I'll have to ask her. She said she spoke with them 2 weeks ago. I spoke with her late yesterday afternoon, and I think she has another call coming up with them. If not today, maybe one day next week. So they're kind of like getting back on track.
Okay, all right, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
One thing, Marla, that I think could be helpful, and it may be something you're already gonna give her, but how you rolled through the information plan they had, and you kind of were checking off things we already did or already had in place, something like that short list. I think I know it was helpful for me going through just to say, okay, if these are things we're doing, we already have done, or we've already made progress on. And I'm sure that may be something helpful for her too, just to have that concept and understanding too.
Right. Yeah, I can definitely walk her through that, because then that kind of speaks to, some of the needs, say, around data and policy research. We already have some of that. Like I said, now our housing study and needs assessment could probably have a little tweaking, some updated data. And, one of the other things that's going to be kind of interesting for us, if we're looking at, getting this thing started in the fall, potentially, the new census data will be out, right? And so, we'll probably need to do some updates, but we won't need a deep dive. So, there's some of these areas that have a price tag, for instance, in like her proposal to Nashville, that we wouldn't necessarily see, or certainly wouldn't see at that same rate, because we've already laid the foundation and have a lot of that. Yeah. But I can definitely track her, where our stuff lines up with what they did in those early days.
Got it. Lisa, you had come off mute. I wasn't sure if you were getting ready to say something a little while ago. Oh. You still on mute?
Hey.
Okay.
There we go. No, I'm good. I appreciate any help we can get. I think it's wonderful.
Okay. I can check on her availability to confirm. I did let her know that we meet the 4th. Fourth Friday of the month. And I think that for September, she is already committed for another community. So I think one of the things I might need to ask you all is whether that previous Friday, the 17th, which is the 3rd Friday, if that could potentially work.
That actually works better for me. The 17th.
Mm-hmm.
I'm available that day.
I've got a meeting.
We say 10 a.m.
I've got a meeting that morning. Well, I may be out by 10 o'clock though. So if the 17th is when it is, then I might be able to make that.
Okay. Yeah, and that's a thing for us to discuss, because I think, our usual meetings are we allow 2 hours, but I'm thinking, if we're going to really do a deep dive, looking at maybe 3 to 4 hours, and if we say started at 10, run to 2, we could do lunch as part of that. We could make that happen.
Well, like I said, my availability is dependent on the previous meeting kind of thing, but we'll see. This is what the new president of Winston-Salem Foundation is going to be in town, and we'll be doing some things with her that day.
Okay. All righty. And 2, if we're going to be together 3 or 4 hours, hopefully, there'll be an opportunity to.
Yeah, maybe I can come in late or something if I need to.
Okay. Okay. And Paula has said that that works for her. I can follow up and confirm that the 17th is a good day. And I'm thinking that maybe if we did a mid-morning start and went to early afternoon, and Paula, this is somewhere that I definitely need some guidance from you on. You know, do you think that there might be an opportunity for some conversation with some neighborhood or community resident stakeholders, maybe that Saturday morning? I don't know if late Friday afternoon would work, but potentially that Saturday morning. And it might be something to think about, but kind of let me know, because she said she'd be willing to stay over to have that opportunity to meet some community folks.
I think we can arrange that.
Okay. Okay, great.
Marla, I'm sorry. I'm kind of doing a couple of things at one time. This is Donna. Could you repeat those dates again so that I can make sure that I'm available and are able to participate?
Yes. We're looking at Friday, September 17th.
Okay. Okay. I believe that'll be fine.
Okay, great. And then there'll be some maybe community engagement on the 18th.
Okay.
Okay, great. Well, I will follow up with her and get everything confirmed and certainly send you all an email and lock all of that down. And I'll start looking for maybe a place for us to convene, because that'll be the next thing, that we'll have to find some place to meet. But I'll get to work on that. Very good, very good. Derwin, are we good on this section of the agenda and ready to go to our action items?
Yep, I think so. If no one has any other questions on that, I think we're good to move.
All right, well, I'll turn it over to you, sir.
Okay. All right, next we have on our agenda here actually the action items on election officer structure. Marla, I don't know if this is about 4 months we've been carrying this over to get some action on it. I know Marla said that there's advisement from city attorney's office that needed to actually have office of chair, vice chair, and secretary. And so want to pause here just to open our floor in reference to our conversation on election officers. Folks desire to serve in any other capacities. And Marla, I guess I would give it to you as a neutral party in terms of the if we were to actually thoughts of how we would do that. We were going to actually do election officers here now today, or if we would, if we were, that's what I said, just turn to you as a neutral party just to kind of hold that election if we were going to do that, or if it would be better if folks felt fine, because we do have just 2 people missing, if we felt fine with maybe offering nominations and then sending that out in a form, in some form that folks everybody's aware of, if there's no, I guess, different folks running against each other, so everybody's on the same page. I'm open to either way we want to move forward that, but I do know this is something that's been out there that I know folks are probably looking for some action for us to take in reference to that. Is there any particular pleasure from the group on how for us to proceed, and any thought, Marla?
I kind of defer to the group in the okay. moment. Yeah.
I don't have any particular notion about how it needs to go. I just know that with some, I've just been reelected or elected for the Board of Trustees at Western Carolina University and some other things. And I know that, even if it were to be thought, I would not be able to hold either one of these officer positions, but I'm happy to do what I can to help anyone that seeks either one of these offices.
I was getting ready to nominate you, Joe.
That's what I was afraid of.
I know, at least for me, just in terms of serving as chair, and I know kind of co-chairing the work, I've enjoyed doing that work, and I if more than honored if folks would allow to continue to do that work, but I am not bound in any way to desire to continue to chair if someone else desires to do that.
I'm in the same position. I'm kind of slammed right now, so I'm happy to provide any support that I can, but don't feel like I'm in a position.
Durham, sounds like the chair is yours. I don't know who else on the call from a coalition member standpoint. So, hadn't heard anything from John Louder. And then what do we do about replacing Tom? Is that the council or the mayor's perspective? Okay, I didn't know who did that.
Yes, the mayor will have to take that up. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
And so just so I mentioned just in terms of just from a process standpoint there, like I said, I'm more than happy to continue to serve with that. If someone want to make a formal nomination, just so we have for minutes and since on making a nomination. I saw your comment in the chat, Paula, but is that a nomination?
Yeah, a motion.
Yeah.
Yes, I move to that.
Yeah.
Yes, I move to that.
And I'll second it.
Okay.
Sorry, this is John. Can y'all hear me? I'm on the road.
Yeah, we hear you, John.
I fully support Derwin, for sure.
Yeah, we hear you, John.
Where am I?
And John, when you
Sorry, can y'all hear me now?
Oh yes, yes.
Okay, sorry about that. I'm on the road to home from Atlanta, so sorry about that. But I fully support Derwin. I think love to see you continue as chair.
And John, when you get a moment, when you're stationary, if you could shoot me your email address, I had a bounce back on you, okay?
Sure thing.
Thank you. Okay, so.
So Mark, because of that, again, I would ask that you just carry that motion just as a.
Okay. So we have a motion by Paula McCoy and a second, and a second by Joe.
Right.
To nominate Derwin as the chair of the coalition. So I guess all in favor, you have to say aye.
Aye.
Donna Woodson, aye.
Paula McCoy.
Brian Almond, aye.
Lisa Sarai, aye.
All right, John made his earlier. All right, I don't see any opposed. So then the ayes have it for Derwin. And then Derwin, are you comfortable picking it up from here for the vice chair and secretary? Because I actually think the officers need to kind of run this part up.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. I just normally in terms of, since you're doing the officer chair, you kind of let someone else do that and then take it back. Yeah. All right. So with that, we'll open the floor for any nominations for the office of vice chair. Are there individuals who desire to serve in the office of vice chair, believe they have the capacity, time to serve vice chair coalition? Are there any?
As a point of discussion, I don't know some of the names and I don't know everybody on the coalition, Derwin, so I don't know.
Yeah, and I know at least Joe and I know Lisa, you all kind of pull yourself out of the mix on the executive roles, but in terms of being able to support in the work, but I know we have a few other folks here, and then I know Paul and George are also missing from the call.
I'd nominate Paul Norby. You know, you're on the call.
I second it.
Who was the second?
Paula.
Oh, okay. All right. Joe, second. Paula. All right.
Well, we'll take a vote. We'll say that that's contingent upon acceptance by Paul and his ability, his thoughts on his ability to serve. I will say, and you all have gotten a lot of information from Paul during his time frame. Paul has contributed a lot in terms of his own assessment, his background, and his work. He's done a lot to kind of help shape and dive into some of the documents and information we have. He has been a great coalition member thus far. So. Good insights.
That's why I nominated him, Derwin.
Yeah.
He does know the word.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Great.
And so with that, are there any other nominations for Office of Vice Chair? Hearing none, we'll close the floor for nominations. Vice Chair with the name of Paul Norby being submitted and nominated for the office of, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Paula.
Aye. Those opposed likewise. Hearing none, that is unanimous. And so we'll move to the office of Secretary. And so we'll consider the floor open for nominations for the office of Secretary. And just for the operations of our group, Marla, for Secretary, I know that staff pretty much normally handles a lot of the meeting communications and information there. What will we see as the kind of the workload or payload for the Secretary, knowing that staff kind of handles some of the things that folks may normally see as the work of the Secretary of the coalition?
I think one of the things would be probably a review of the meeting notes ahead of time, and maybe making sure that we have the most up-to-date information on the members are probably two of the major items that I can think of in the moment. Because we do, try to take notes, and we can, work with the secretary on the note taking. But I don't know that it requires a whole lot.
Yeah.
And I can confirm, if there are other duties, I can confirm with the city attorney, but those are the most basic that come to mind.
Okay. So with that, nominations for the office of Secretary. Are there any?
This is Donna. I would like to nominate Paula.
Second.
A second.
Paula, are you willing to accept the nomination?
Yes, I'm willing.
Good deal, Paul. Good deal.
I know I sound enthusiastic, but
Just tell Marla and the staff not to go anywhere.
I hate the media person was late, so they were late.
Right. All right. So with that, we have a motion and a second for Paul McCoy as Secretary of the Affordable Housing Coalition. Hearing any other nominations for Secretary? Hearing none, we'll consider floor closed for nomination for Secretary. We have one nomination on the floor. All in favor of that nomination, say aye.
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 Aye. All opposed likewise? Hearing none, that's unanimous. Paula McCoy as Secretary for Affordable Housing Coalition. All right. Hard work. But appreciate everybody's commitment, diligence, and willingness to work and to serve. I'll say, and I don't know, Marla, you'd agree, but I think this is the, as we're positioning and moving and pivoting now into the work and the phase of the work that I think will be much more engaging in terms of just a broader community and work. And so I think the commitment and work has been underground behind the board is our and impactful work as we move forward with the work of the coalition.
Great.
All right. And would for another one for Paul, so we just need to just confirm his willingness to serve in that. So, okay. Moving forward on our action items. So with we have here, and we've talked about this in the past in terms of just a coalition structure and around our working groups and how and if we should continue those working groups, and if so, in what format. And so I want to pause on that question. As you know, we talked about it in the past. And I know in the past, we felt some sense that we've gotten a lot more done during our time kind of having these full meetings. We towards a space of digging a bit deeper. There is likely some additional roles for those working groups to play, but just want to kind of open that up to the group to see thoughts on how we should move forward with those working groups and establish a plan for that.
I think we should continue the working groups because, I mean, COVID certainly caused us to lose some momentum, but I think that, you know, there were some good ideas that came out of those groups, and maybe the next phase would be implementing them if it's still appropriate as it relates to the other planning that we're doing.
Any other thoughts on that? And so I guess if we were to move forward with Joe. Yeah.
No, I was gonna say, I second what Paula was saying. I you know, and maybe it's because they did lose momentum that I kind of, I can only speak for myself, that I lost some interest in the one that I was on, and, you know, the frequency of meetings, and some I couldn't make. So I just felt disengaged, if you would. So I don't know. Sometimes it's, if you've got working groups that are really going to be productive, it's one thing, but if you got them and, you know, you don't, I don't know. I just felt like sometimes the work wasn't moving forward enough to really justify having separate groups, then come back together as a full group for the full coalition meetings kind of thing. So I don't know. I'm a little ambivalent about it, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
And I agree with Joe's point there. I wonder if it might make sense to continue the working groups, but spend maybe a little bit of time in our next full group meeting defining what each of the, or maybe here defining what those should do and what roles, right, you know, are still applicable to those committees, and maybe which things we should move on or have them refocus towards.
Makes sense. And with that, Marla, I don't know if, just so that, because I know within the council's creation of the coalition, there were certain establishment of some groups or committees within that. And because we have worked in this space for this time, there may be a need, or maybe, and as we assess that at that meeting, if it changes drastically, maybe a request to the council that changes that so that we are operating within what the guidance of the council from those groups. Do you think that's necessary if we decide to change some of that? Just want to make sure that we don't run afoul of the structure or guidance from that.
I think I would be happy to confer with the city attorney to see if there's any special thing that needs to take place, if there's a drastic change. I mean, I think, you know, kind of like Ryan said, if you want to go in and kind of better refine or define what the work might be per those groups as outlined in the in the council resolution, I don't think that there's an issue there. And it may just be even how you plan or strategize the work, right? So I think that notion of just kind of re-examining everything and how it can unfold. And then if there looks to be a need for something significantly different, then we can just talk with the city attorney and get some guidance from there. And, and I think because they're working groups and that's not where the ultimate policy is made, if you will, or decisions, I would suspect that, it would be okay to even expand or modify the work in general. But certainly, like I said, if it gets to a point where you think that it's something that's significantly different, then we can always consult with the city attorney.
Got it. And from my perspective, I think those categories are pretty broad areas. So, if we wanted to dig in a little bit deeper in anything or concentrate that work, I think it avails itself pretty much there. So what I heard was folks want to continue that work, but we want to make sure that the time that folks are spending and the substance is meaningful. And so we want to spend some time in our, that time we'll spend together, actually spending that time to define that a little more so that folks feel confident and comfortable that time and energy is being spent properly in that time.
Mm-hmm. And to Paula's question about, is this an opportunity to maybe look at engaging community? I think that was part of what the plan was at some point along the way. And so it now makes me wonder if, as we are looking to maybe gear up the housing plan work, which will have that community component, if that's a good place to kind of open that door and get that started. Because I think that probably creating the plan, I think might as an outcome may speak to some additional stuff with the coalition. And so, and the community engagement piece may be a part of that. So it'll be interesting to see how the coalition itself is kind of viewed and positioned within the plan. But I do think that this is a good opportunity to really start the community engagement piece.
So let me ask, were the work groups, when somebody talked about, are they mentioned in the charter documents for the Affordable Housing Coalition? So those work groups are spelled out and named there. Okay, all right. I had forgotten that, or I wasn't aware of that, because I was wondering if any of those work groups, I don't know what will happen after the meeting in September when we have the housing NOLA person to come, but if we need to reorganize ourselves around whatever we feel like that work needs to be in order to get the plan started to be developed, might be a reformation of those work groups. I don't know. I was just curious about that.
Mm-hmm. And I was kind of thinking the same thing. How this work around the plan might inform some of the activities of the coalition itself. Again, I think that the work groups that we have are probably the start, not the be all, right? And so I don't suppose that if there was a desire or need to add additional work groups based on what comes out of our trying to do the plan, I don't know that would be an issue, because then the full coalition actually makes the recommendations overall in terms of its advisory role.
Yeah, okay. I think you got some direction, though, Dara.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. All right. So we'll bring that forward, and we want to have some time carved out, Marlies, and that conversation specifically for the work groups and that additional definition at that time. And it sounds like it may be something at the end of that conversation once we've kind of had the fuller dialogue around the work, and then we bring this up towards the end on next steps on how the work group should function to carry out whatever work we define from that table.
Okay.
All right. Got it. Thanks, Paula. All right. And then the last item here is just coalition member engagement. I know we touched a bit on that just now from the work group components, but just want to make sure that folks feel engaged, make sure that folks have a space and place in the conversation. I know that Tom, he stepped down from his role on the board, and I did reach out and have some conversation with him. And I know for him, one of the things was just he wanted to have some freedom in his advocacy in terms of how he was able to approach some of the work, and didn't necessarily want it to be constrained, you know, as an affordable housing coalition member, and everything he said it did was kind of pass through that lens. And I at least shared with him my perspective, you know, as much as, you know, working and serving in the Affordable Housing Coalition, Derwin Montgomery as a citizen still has his own perspective that may be different from, you know, the Affordable Housing Coalition. And, you know, we want to make sure folks feel engaged, but also feel empowered, you know, your voice and your space at the table overall, as we're continuing to move forward with this work. And then lastly, as I mentioned, I think this next phase, this next chapter, next quarter of our work really is kind of the getting into the meat and potatoes of how we move forward. But one pause just to, you know, again, give space, place, folks, making sure folks feel engaged, your professional experience, background, all that has been leveraged as well as we can in this time.
I know one thing too, as we go forward, separate and apart from the work around the housing plan, will be, you know, what things might be needed from staff, you know, what support that could promote more engagement of our members. You know, I do recognize that when we have more folks at the meeting, that our conversations tend to be more robust, you know, but are there other things that might be needed that we could do to support more engagement? And you know, that may be something that the members need to just kind of think about and just let us know, or, you know, we can have more discussion maybe in the next meeting. But I do think that, you know, definitely we have to hear from you to kind of chart our path as staff.
Well, that makes sense too, Marla. That makes sense. Yeah, I think engagement it's a key for any community, I mean, any committee or coalition or a group work kind of thing. And you know, and we're all going to be at different levels of engagement as we go through it. You know, how much attention we pay to things and what maybe some of our hot buttons are around the topics that we're talking about, kind of thing. But and maybe it's COVID related. I don't want to put everything on there, but it's been a challenge to stay engaged, other than when we have a meeting, if you would, kind of thing. So, and I don't know how to rectify that.
Right, and staff has been kind of overwhelmed because of COVID,
right.
You know, and so and so we've been like, okay, you know, how do we make sure that we reach out in a timely way and get documents out? So. You know, I've shared with some others that COVID has changed our world quite a bit, and it's not always immediately clear how it's changed, but certainly where we sit as staff, we can see a tremendous amount of change, and our ability to manage it is going to be the next challenge. That's the next, that is the new frontier, is how to manage this new world that we're in. You know, because of the truth.
That's where we got to get to that technical support real quick.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we'll need it, but you know, the reality is we're still in a pandemic, right? And so, you know, we're still having to modify our behaviors, even though it seems as though the worst of it is over, but it's not gone. So, yeah, we're living in a state of change.
Yes, we are. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Anyone else, any commentary in that area? If not, we didn't have anything else under additional other updates there, but are there any other items or things that folks felt we needed to bring to the table today? All right, well, with that, then we'll look for, I guess, confirmation, Marla, on that September 17th meeting date and time, so I ask folks to, you know, hold that space on your calendar. And we're looking at what, from 10, were we looking at 10 on that day, Marla, or start at 10?
We can, if you want to start at 11, and I mean, it's really up to you. I think she would probably fly in the night before, so she'd be at our disposal. So, you know, what do you recommend?
Since it's a different day, you know, I'm open, I'm flexible. I guess maybe the sooner than later we just hold that day, and then if we can get something out to get our folks' calendars held on that time frame. And with acknowledging that, you know, I think maybe a later start time probably would work better for Joe, just as he mentioned, but just making sure that, you know, we get a time set on folks' schedule so we can hold it, be best. So, yeah.
Okay, that sounds good. Very good then. And if anyone has any suggestions on a location, please shoot them my way. Be happy to take a look at it. I mean, there's a chance we could use a city office, city conference room, but if you have some great ideas on a space, just let me know.
Do you have to be aware, will you have to be guided by social distancing or not, Marlo? I mean, will any of that, what will be the criteria for the face-to-face meeting, since not many are taking place?
So we're not required to wear face masks or distance in the city buildings anymore. Okay. I would prefer, though, we be in a space where we have the opportunity for a little distancing. That's just my preference. Right. I still wear my mask when I'm in meetings. Yeah. Okay. Ideally, a place with some space.
All right. I just wasn't sure. Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Got it. You just let me know, Marlon. I'm more than willing to offer our church space in September. We have our reentry plan for September, so nobody will be upset, so we'll already be heading back into the space in September. So that's an option you can put on the list if you can't find anything else.
Okay. I appreciate it. All right.
Okay.
All right. With that, don't have any other items there for us. Thank everybody for your time, commitment, and look forward as we continue to move this work forward.
Thanks a lot. Take care, Darren.
Thank you all.
Thanks for everything.
Take care.
Everybody. Have a good weekend.
Thank you. You too. All right. Bye-bye.